I learned primarily from my grandmother, Rebecca, who was a traditional healer and a midwife. And then another person that was really key was my uncle, Campbell Pebequash. And Campbell one day said to me, "Where does the Creator live?" And I answered right away and said, "Well, the Creator lives in our heart." And he said, "That's true, but the Creator lives in our unconscious mind." And I found that really interesting because uh, art is created through connecting to our spirits and to something a little bit outside ourselves. And so I just ask all of you now, as we start this meeting here on Turtle Island, to just turn inward inside yourself and to feel the beating of your heart and to feel the blood rushing around your body and to feel the beautiful air that gives us life every minute that we're here on this earth. And before I say the blessing, I just want to honor the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people whose territory I'm on, and to honor the territory that all of you are on in this gathering. Manitou, creator of all life, we give thanks, Great Spirit, for all that we have in this world. We give thanks for our ancestors in the spirit world, for all the rituals, dances, and songs that they've left for us so we can live and love. We give thanks, Great Spirit, for the blessing of our brothers and sisters in this circle. We give thanks for our children, grandchildren, and those yet to come. And we give thanks, Great Spirit, for the air we breathe, the food that nourishes our bodies, the medicines that help us to heal, and the clear water that we drink each day. And we ask in a good and humble way that you bless all of our storytellers, all of our dancers, all of our artists, visual artists, our poets, our singers, our drummers. And we ask that the blessings, that the good forces in the universe shine on a light on all of us as we come together and as we connect in a good and humble way. And we ask for guidance and humility and gentleness and calmness so we can bring forward the great mystery in all its forms and all of what we do together and as individuals. All my relations, how.
Thank you. Miigwech. Thank you, Sharon. Well, I'm seeing more and more of you joining us. That's really fantastic. I'd like to say hello to all of you and say thank you for joining us. And of course, many of us already know Steven Loft, who's with us from the Canada Council, from CKS, from Creative Knowing and Sharing. He's a Mohawk of the Six Nations with Jewish heritage. He's currently the director of CKS. And as a curator, scholar, writer, and a media artist, in 2010, he was named Trudeau National Visiting Fellow at Ryerson University in Toronto. He's held positions as a curator in residence in a number of places, including the National Gallery of Canada, and the Urban Shaman Gallery in Winnipeg, the Aboriginal curator at the Art Gallery of Hamilton. And he's also was the producer and artistic director of the Native Indian Inuit Photographers Association in Hamilton. So he's curated a lot of group and solo exhibitions across Canada and some international, and has also co-edited some books, Transference, Technology, Tradition, Aboriginal Media, and New Media Art from the Banff Center Press in 2005. Also, he's also had another publication called The Coded Territories, Indigenous Pathways in New Media from the University of Calgary Press. So we're really great that you were able to give us some time, Steven. I know you're very busy and we've got lots going on. So welcome, and a few words from you, please, Steven, just to say hello.
Thank you, Margot, and thank you for those beautiful opening words, Sharon. I think we need words like that these days more than ever, and it really heartens me to hear them. That just lifted me today, and I hope it did so for everyone else. Yeah, my name is Steve Loft. As Margot mentioned, I'm Ganyangahaga. My home community is the Six Nations of the Grand River. I currently have the honor and the privilege of living and working on the unceded territories of the Algonquin Nation. I just want to start by acknowledging what we're all going through, and certainly I speak for the whole Canada Council when I say that we recognize the devastating effects that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on arts communities across this land, and particularly hard hit have been Indigenous artists, organizations, and communities. And just to say that my thoughts and our thoughts are with you and your loved ones as we go through this. It's challenging, it's difficult, but as Elder Sharon so eloquently put it, we need to come together and also look inward and find that strength and find that joy that's still there. And as people involved in the arts and culture, as creatives, it will be vital that we bring that spirit back to our people and to all people who are suffering now. It's going to be a long road. We know that. It's going to be a difficult one. It's full of, unfortunately, severe hardship, even death. And I think we have to think about each other and ourselves. Stay safe and well. Make sure that we're very cognizant that this is going to have a really devastating effect on all of us in a variety of ways, and to take good care of ourselves and those around us. The Canada Council for the Arts is very, very cognizant of the effects that this current pandemic has had on our communities. We've done a lot of our own inward looking into ways that we can best support our communities now and into the future. We have done some things. I'll go over them very quickly. I'll be happy to talk more about them as this meeting goes on. We have directed, for example, our program officers to take a maximum flexibility approach when it comes to our current grant holders and also applicants. We know that this has had a devastating effect. We are here to work with you to find ways through it, to help you, to support you as much as we can. We are not in the business of penalizing people for things that they have no control over. So just so you know that we are here to support you, and we will. It's important to note that I think there are two phases to what we're all going through. The first phase, which is I think what we're in, is survival. And we need to put all emphasis on surviving this as artists, as arts professionals, as cultural carriers, as organizations. This is going to be a very difficult phase. The government has put in some initiatives that have been very helpful. We've been part of those discussions, but it's important to understand that, yes, this is the survival part of this phase. But we're also going to have to look at the recovery phase and what that looks like. And that will look very different. And just so, you know, we're going to really have to do a lot of that inward looking to see what our arts community is going to look like post-pandemic. We know that there will be a new normal. Do we know what that looks like now? I don't think we do. I think we can make some assumptions, but it's going to be very challenging and very difficult. It's something we're going to all have to do together. We're very also concerned about our organizations, which really are the frame on our activities. We want to make sure that they survive this and so that they can be strengthened in that recovery phase. To that end, we have given advance payments to our core or operating organizations in order that they may make sure that they can continue operations as they are, and again, giving them maximum flexibility in terms of their programming. We know this has been disruptive. We know that things have had to be canceled, postponed, that making future plans is almost impossible right now. And again, we are here to work with you. You know, there will be no penalties for those kinds of things. We understand that completely, and we are here to work with you. We've also announced a couple of new initiatives to help artists and organizations do some programming during this phase. And we've just announced a new initiative called Digital Originals. We know that many of our artists have already been using their skills and talents and gifts that they have and transmitting them in digital platforms. I've seen so much good stuff that way, and I'm sure many of you have as well. It's incredible. All artists across this land have stepped up, and so we want to be able to provide some support for that. So we now have what's called the Digital Originals Initiative, where artists can get $5,000 to help them do that. We don't want artists to have to go out of pocket for these kinds of things. So there's a lot of information on that on our website. It's quite new, so you may not have heard of it yet. The other one is we know organizations have been stepping up in this way. Organizations such as IPAA, which has done an amazing job of bringing artists to the public in digitally engaged ways. So now there's been some changes made to our digital strategy fund, where organizations can apply for up to $50,000 for those kinds of initiatives. Again, this is very new. There will be more information on that coming in the days to come. But there will be a lot of more information on that on our website as well. We're also looking, the Indigenous arts community has been particularly hard hit for already Indigenous artists were made less money than other artists, had fewer opportunities. We recognize that. We are in the CKS team is in conversation now with some of our community members on ways that we might be able to address that. I'm hoping we might be able to provide more information in the coming 2 to 3 weeks. But please know that we are actively thinking of ways that we can better support our artists as they go through this difficult time. The other thing that we've been doing is actively working with the Government of Canada through the Department of Canadian Heritage as they roll out the initiatives that government has brought forward. We've been well heard in terms of making sure that things like the emergency response benefit and the wage subsidy would be available and accessible to artists and arts organizations. And you may have heard some changes that were made for those programs. We're still working with our colleagues across government to make sure that artists, arts organizations are not left behind in these initiatives. We think it's vital that the government step up and to the extent that they have, and we will support them, and we will continue to make sure that the concerns from our communities are well heard. You may have heard that the government did announce a 500 million fund specifically for arts, culture, and sports. We are in active negotiations with them and discussions with them about what role Canada Council will play in dispersing that money. We're hoping to hear an announcement about that. Our CEO is in constant communication with the minister and the minister's office. We are hoping that by next week we will be able to announce our role in distributing that money to our applicant base. The other thing, and people have asked us about this, is different arts and cultural agencies and councils around the world and in Canada have taken various approaches to how we handle this survival phase. We had long and deep discussions about this when it was clear the pandemic would have such an effect on our communities. We decided at that time that the best way to support our artists and organizations moving forward was to do the steps that I've already mentioned, but also to make sure that we continue to process grants, because we're already set up for those. The best way to continue getting money into the hands of our artists is through our granting programs. So even though we're all working from home, I'm in my little improvised basement office here, we did and we do have the capacity to telework. Luckily, we had just gone through a major IT exercise, so we're fully connected to our operations, and we are able to continue operations, to continue accepting applications, continue to disperse grant monies, continue to do our peer assessment process, albeit virtually. There's been no break in that capacity. Some deadlines have changed. There's been some postponement of certain components, not in CKS, but in some of the other programs. You just need to go to our website, to the deadlines, and it has information there. We also have a very detailed, frequently asked questions and information page, regarding the pandemic and Canada Council that's on our webpage. There's a lot of information there. Again, all of our staff are able to accept phone calls and emails. I will say, however, that we are at a reduced capacity. Our staff, as well as everybody, have challenges, especially those who are caring for others, either elderly or children, or members of the family who might be affected medically by this pandemic. So we do ask that you have some patience that way, and there are a few things that we're not doing. We're not providing feedback on former grant applications at this time. We don't have the capacity to do that right now, but we will go back to a situation when we can do that. But certainly if you have questions or queries about any of our grant programs, including CKS, you can still contact us through the regular ways you would be able to. I will say at this time, and as we move on, that we are always happy to respond to questions, concerns, and issues in French. My French is not strong enough to do so in a live situation like this. So if people do have questions they would like to have answered in French, please contact me after the meeting, and I will have a bilingual team member get in touch with you directly. Si vous souhaitez poser une question en français, contactez-moi après la réunion et un membre bilingue de notre équipe se fera un plaisir de communiquer avec vous directement. So I know I want to thank IPAA for convening this meeting. I know that there's a lot of concern especially the performing arts community. In many ways, the performing arts community has even more challenges than some of our other artistic communities. As I say, we're here to support you. I will try to answer as many questions as thoughtfully and as deeply as I can. However, this is, it's a moving target. Things change very quickly. So some things I won't have an answer to, but I will try to give you the best information I have. And I would also say to also make sure to keep checking back on our website, because that's where the most up-to-date information is. So thank you for allowing me into your homes, and I'll put it back to Margot. Now we'll go.
Thank you. Thank you, Steven. Well, I'm going to get right to the questions that were submitted, and we'll go through a number of questions that we have, and then we'll actually have an opportunity to have new questions from the gathering here today. So the first question we have is really basic. It's how do we revise grants submitted pre-COVID for adapted proposals? For instance, capital expenses in recording equipment rather than traveling to a recording studio.
Yeah, I'll take that sort of in two parts. It's really easy to revise a grant. We have a grant update form that's available on our website. If you can't find it, just call and we'll tell you where to find that. As I've said, the message to the officers is to take a maximum flexibility approach. If activities need to be postponed because of this, that's not a problem generally. If they have to be changed because of this, that shouldn't be a problem. If you're going to migrate something to a digital platform, again, we encourage that. We will be very, very open to changes in current grant holders. That's, that's the least we can do. And even if you say, look, I don't know what's going to happen, can I just sit on this for the next 6 months? That's fine. You do have up to 3 years to complete activities. And again, use the time if need be, or if there are ways to do things slightly different, we'd be open to that. For example, if you were going to collaborate with some other artists, but obviously now you can't because of physical distancing, but you want to collaborate in a different way, and you want to say, oh, I would like to take that travel money that I had there, because we're not going to meet this way, we're going to meet in a different way, but I'd like to pay them an honorarium for that time that they would spend online, or some software that we would need. We're going to be very, very open to that. Now, capital expenses, that's a bit of a different situation. As many of you might know, and those who don't, the Canada Council capital expenses are not eligible expenses to the Canada Council. That remains true. It has to do with a variety of things, including jurisdictional issues around capital. But I will say, in terms of this, in CKS, just for those of you who don't know, CKS is Creating, Knowing, and Sharing the Arts and Cultures of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Peoples. It's a program within the Canada Council developed by and for and run by Indigenous people. It's an Indigenous space within the Canada Council. I'm happy to speak to that as well. It has some very stark differences from other programs at Canada Council. It's unique in many ways. It's grounded in Indigenous ways of knowing and in creating and sharing. So I can talk more about that later, but when I say CKS, that's what we refer to it as. In CKS only at the Canada Council, we do have as an eligible expense specialized equipment. And CKS has it only because we understand that there is not enough Indigenous infrastructure across this land for many reasons. One of the big ones being is that we were denied funding for so long. So that there is a recognition there that we need to help build that infrastructure. And part of that is things like access to equipment. So there is a space for that. When we say specialized, we mean it has to be very specialized. We still consider, for example, a computer not specialized equipment. However, software or devices to do specific recording in this sense could be eligible. If this is for a grant that already exists and you want to say, oh, I was going to have this money to go to a recording studio, can I now shift it to equipment? What I would say at this point is the best thing is if you've already got that as a line item, that was what your intent was in the first place, was to go to a recording studio, probably just wait, put the project on hold to see if you're going to have access to the recording studio that you wanted to go to originally. If it becomes impossible or untenable for you to do so, then come back to us and we will discuss the possibility of changing that. For potential applicants, if you're thinking, yeah, I really don't want to go to a recording studio that might not understand my particular cultural or artistic aesthetic and my culture, for example, and that I have the ability to do that with myself if I can just get some specialized equipment or some specialized software, then if that is viable, you may be able to include that as an eligible expense. But please contact us beforehand, because you would have to put some justification in there and some language around that. So the possibilities there, the best advice is to always contact us first, or in the case of an ongoing grant, to contact us if you want to make changes, and we'll deal with those on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. The next question is, there's quite a few questions in this, but they wanted to know the waiting time for a grant of 4 months, or will the grant notification be changed at all during this time? And is, obviously, is there someone to talk about specific applications? As you've just said, you're not, we're not talking about how to improve them. Well, you're not taking those right now. You're not going to be talking about past applications right now. So that's a question. Tied into that, yeah, so let's just talk about the length of time for a grant first at this point. Yeah.
Okay, and I've got the questions here as well, yes. Margot, so maybe I'll just go through them for this big one. Yeah. In terms of our regular grants, the notification process won't be shorter. As I've said, we're on a certain reduced capacity. We are still able to do everything, but it's not going to get quicker. But we're trying to stay to the times that we already have. We think we can. Some things are going to shift to quicker. For example, the Digital Originals Initiative and the Digital Strategy Fund that I mentioned, those will be quick turnaround, 3 to 4 weeks. We are looking at some other potential initiatives to get some things out to artists quicker. But if we want to continue with our peer assessment process, which is vital, I would say, to this process, it's still going for our regular programs. The regular times are going to continue. As I said, any new deadlines are on our website. Yes, we're not giving feedback at this time. What kinds of projects will qualify? In CKS, what I would say, and this has been true all along of CKS, it really supports an incredibly wide and vast array of activities. Really many things that under the old funding model at Canada Council would not have been supported. that aren't supported through other programs, but we acknowledge that Indigenous artists don't just work in those old Euro-Western disciplines. Some do, and that's great, but that we have to take a much wider view. So we call it the arts and cultures of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. So in terms of how you create, what you create, how you share, how you disseminate, we fund knowledge transfer, for example. You know, that's a wide category. We understand the importance of sharing our culture with each other and with others. That can include language initiatives, for example, done through the arts, things aimed at youth, things aimed, you know, for a general public, things for just us. So if you look at our guidelines on the web, it really is wide. We're also happy to answer questions. We're also different from the other programs in the applicant base we have. We don't see the definitions of applicants in the same way that Canada Council used to, and many other programs still do. So in CKS, we fund artists, and we don't define professional because that's always been defined in a very Euro-Western context. Artist. We fund aspiring artists, those people who want to be artists. We support arts professionals, so people like curators, dramaturgists, all a vast array. We fund cultural carriers, those people from our communities whose role is the maintenance and the passing on of our knowledge and culture. They can access that. Groups and collectives, as well as Indigenous organizations. So we really, what we heard from our communities when we were developing this program, and what we have steadfastly maintained, is this had to be widely acceptable, and that we had to change these very rigid definition of what art is, what an artist is, what a professional is. So it's really quite wide. If also eligible expenses are, if you don't have the knowledge and capacity for certain activities, you can certainly, eligible expenses, you can bring in somebody either to help you with something or to mentor you so that you can then do it. So the example given was to record professionally. I mean, physical distancing is out now, but if you wanted to learn how to do that, you could put that as part of a project application. So again, this idea of knowledge transfer is very important to us. Will there be money available to produce free public live streams? Yes, through our Digital Originals initiative. Please take a look at that. That turns over very quickly. Will digital signatures be accepted from participants? Absolutely. Will people with, this is a very important question, will people with disabilities be able to get approval for accessibility funding for during the application and also to help with the project? Absolutely, those things are already in place. Those are two initiatives that we put in very specifically when we changed our big transformation at council. Again, we do have accessibility officers who many times come from those communities or are extremely knowledgeable about them that can help with that. So if you have any questions about that, again, go to the website or contact us. You can by phone, by email. If you don't know the specific place to go, just ask myself, any of my team, and they will direct you to people who can really help you out. This is it's a very important conversation, and one that is ongoing at council, how we can better support artists from deaf and disability communities. It's been a big part of our discussions around our strategic plan as well.
Great, thank you, Steve. We're going to a question now that I'm not really sure where it came from, so I'm just going to read it out. They want to know if there are any changes planning to be made to make programs more accessible and relatable to urban Indigenous folks. Have you thought about that, Steve? I'm not really entirely sure the impetus of this question.
Yeah, as I said, we really designed this program to be very widely accessible to urban communities, to reserve-based communities, to remote communities. It really was developed very thoughtfully that way. We do get a lot of applications, and we have a great success rate from urban communities. Uh, so we haven't seen any trend there that shows that that's not happening. We are, the program is only 3 years old. We're taking a look at it. We're always open to comments, concerns from the community. So if whoever or other people want to follow up on this, but we really haven't had, that hasn't not been an issue. Perhaps it might be an issue of access on some level. The process itself, getting onto our online portal, can be difficult for certain communities. If that is the case, we are happy to help you in that way. We have technical support systems in place at the council. We do have our deaf and disability accessibility, which also goes to specifically to Indigenous people who, for cultural reasons, also have some challenges, or regionality reasons. We know in the north the internet connectivity isn't as good. So we're totally willing to work with people on that.
Great, thank you. The next question talks about longer term, 2 to 5 year impact of CKS viability. I guess it's people are concerned about, what about the cutbacks that might come to the council, or funding cutbacks? How is CKS protected from this, if so?
Great question. As you know, we are, to a certain extent, not a certain extent, we are an agency of the federal government, and we do get our funding from them. Luckily, a few years ago, when the new government was put in place, they doubled the funding to the Canada Council from $180 million to $360 million. Which we are very grateful for. The arts have never seen an investment like that. And at the same time, we were proposing CKS, and the council made a very serious commitment to Indigenous people within our strategic plan and within the development of what we then called the new funding model. And as the council got its funding doubled, funding to Indigenous people was tripled, mostly through CKS, in an unprecedented move. Last year, CKS alone dispersed $13 million to Indigenous artists, organizations, and communities. There was also an additional $4 million from our other programs, because they're also accessible to Indigenous people. So I'm very happy to say we actually surpassed the tripling that we had promised. The commitment from the council, I can tell you, is incredibly strong. All indications are that we would maintain this funding moving forward. Could there be a cut to the council? Yes, it could happen. And we don't know what kind of economy we're going into. It's one of our biggest, our concerns, of course. What I can say is the senior management has been very clear that the last thing to go would be grants, and that's everybody, and that we have made very, very serious commitments to Indigenous peoples. There is no protection. However, what we've done is made sure that the way we've set this up, and we have done so in a way that our artists are the ones who are leading the charge in saying how important this is. If we get into more challenging times, we will work with our communities to make sure that our funding is as secure as possible. But yes, that's a concern.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So can you anticipate, given the situation, that we'll experience any gaps in program delivery or funding in the next while?
I do not. We're certainly for this year, we are fully funded. I really don't, and this is a personal opinion, I'll just make that clear, personally, I do not think that we would be a target for cutbacks. This government at least has been very clear in terms of the investments they've already made. You know, there's a lot to criticize about this and other governments, but I think in general their response to the pandemic has been with speed and with the amount of funding they put in. I have been very happy with that. I don't see them moving to a place where they would start cutting back. I think the message they've been sending is that when we get to that recovery period, it's actually going to need stimulus, not austerity. I can't, you know, say for sure, but I would expect that we might see further investments, maybe not in the arts and culture because we did get that very large increase a few years ago. But I and the council is very much advising that we make sure that the arts and culture sector is one of the ones that will need that kind of stimulus. We're very hard hit and we don't have the capacity that certain private enterprises have to weather these kinds of economic storms. So I'm thinking the next 2 to 5 years are vital to our communities. We will do what we as much as we can for that, and I'm very hopeful that when the recovery phase does come in, we will be able to act quickly and flexibly on those issues.
Thank you. The next question talks about that as a theater organization that can't produce work during this time, what effect will that have on their funding?
Okay. If you're an operating or core organization, it will have no effect on your funding at all. We're not going to be clawing back money. We're not going to be doing anything like that. So you are safe. We will have discussions as we move forward, but don't worry about that. If you're an organization that counts on project grants, if you already have project grants, as I said, we're very happy to work with you in terms of mitigating, postponing if need be, changing, all fine. If you were expecting to apply for project grants and now feel, I can't because there's no way I can do this, there are challenges for you. If you do decide, for example, that you can do some programming, perhaps in a digital way, please come with those projects. Or if you have the capacity and perhaps you're part of the wage subsidy program and you think I can survive, our organization can survive the next few months and then we'll put in an application. I highly encourage you to. We're not, we still have our 4 short-term project deadlines per year and 1 long-term projects per year. We actually have more money in the CKS budget this year than we had last year. So our capacity to get money out is still there. So I would say think in innovative ways, think in ways that push boundaries. Or if you think, no, we just want to hunker down for a while and see what happens, but look to those deadlines down the road. And again, we're happy to work with you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The next question talks about new applicants to operating. Will there be any new applicants accepted into this year's CKS operating stream?
The current answer is yes. Absolutely, that is our intent. Nothing right now has changed that. So those applications will come in September. If there are changes, we will let the community know. But the intent is yes to bring in new applicants to that component.
Okay. We have a question here about a commitment to create peer assessment juries and positions within the CKS that specifically have a visible and lived experience in being trans, disabled, or two-spirit, Indigi-Queer. What has there been any discussion around this and improving that?
Absolutely. We understand that in our communities, these are realities. As a body, what we have done is, and we have had for a while, but it's been updated, is a code of ethics that applies to our staff, but also to our peer assessors, because they are, for that period, employed by the Canada Council. Our expectation is that they follow that code of ethics. If within the peer assessment setting itself, issues are raised about the comportment of a staff person or an external assessor being abusive in any way, we do have an authority and a responsibility to make sure that our utmost principle is to the safety and wellness of all of our employees and external consultants or external assessors. And we have a commitment to the fairest assessment possible. Our officers who run peer assessment committees are very cognizant of that. We've done a lot of work with our staff around this. We continue to do that. What we can't do is exclude people based on information received from the community, but we do take very seriously complaints that come in, and we remain very vigilant to those kinds of issues.
Okay. A question that I'm not even sure of. How many organizations are dedicated to Indigenous performing arts in Canada?
I don't know. This might be actually a question for IPAA, to take a look at if you may have already. I will say one thing of our core organizations, which we currently have 25, 13 are Indigenous performing arts organizations. I don't know the total for all of Council's core organizations. So certainly well represented in CKS core, but I can also tell you that the NAC, the National Arts Center, is commissioning a study in Indigenous performing arts coming up. So that might reveal some of those answers. And also it's going to be looking at the landscape or the cosmology of Indigenous performing arts on this land, which I think is a wonderful initiative that we are also a partner on. So we may have more information like that in a year or so when that's complete, or sooner, depending on when we can get back to it, given, social distancing. So yeah, we are actively engaged in research. It's one of the big things that goes on that perhaps the community doesn't know so much about. We recently were partnered in a big Indigenous music study that looked at the landscape of Indigenous music across the land. That was several partners. APTN led it. We're engaging in other research around how arts and culture affect Indigenous communities. And generally we make the reports public when they come out. We do have a webpage for that as well. So anything that we've already done will be there. Might be very interesting for you. Some of them are really good. We also engage in evaluations and assessments of our programs themselves. And although we don't make that information public, we do generally do executive summaries. There will be some of those coming up as well. So yeah, we do a lot of research, and I think that that's one of the guiding principles, again, in this new funding model that we have, this new transformation. We definitely, the biggest change for me from the old Canada Council to the the biggest transformation, obviously for me, and I think in general, is the Indigenous commitments. But the other change is that, and this is council-wide, is that we've stopped being a transactional organizations where, you know, people put their applications in, they get an answer, that's it. Well, we now see ourselves as much more a part of the larger infrastructure of arts. It's again why it's so important that we have a very specific Indigenous space within that, because we cannot look at arts and cultures in what we now know as Canada without having a distinctive Indigenous voice. So I think it speaks to a very much more a relational position, so that we are part of this community. And in some ways we can lead, in some kind of ways we respond. But there's a real change, and I think it's a shift that is really good. I think that, you know, seeing ourselves as kind of the bank of arts is the wrong way to think about this. If we want to truly have an arts and culture that, one, honors the first peoples of this land, but also looks at community and communities in a vastly different way. We're not talking about nation building anymore. We're talking about society building, and arts and culture is intrinsic to that. So those are some of the changes that have happened here.
The next question talks about adjusted programming to online platforms. Maybe you could talk about that, because they're talking about some initiatives that were canceled and some alternatives being offered.
Yeah.
Could you discuss that, please?
Sure. As I said, if you're already a grant recipient or you're holding a grant and you want to make those changes, we're absolutely open to it. If you're thinking of putting in an application, absolutely think in that way. We encourage it. We know there are going to be changes. No, we're not going to go to a digital world where live public engagement doesn't exist. I don't think we could survive that. I certainly want to see artists. I want to have that lived experience of being in a room with them. So I don't think that's going to change, but absolutely think innovation. Think, you know, I think Indigenous artists specifically, because of our history, because we've always had to innovate, because we've always had to adapt, because we've always had to resist, think of it that way and think, I will challenge the Canada Council on this one. So absolutely do that. And again, we also have the new digital initiatives that are very specific to that.
Right. We have a question about a project grant for play production. And they wanted to know about your flexibility if the production delays are extended well into 2021. So can we talk about the extensions and approval to do that?
Absolutely, no problem. We do ask that you complete those forms. We do have to track these things and report on them eventually. So just contact your program officer, put in that update form, and the approval should be no problem.
We have a question here. What can I do to help?
In fact, that's such a wonderful question. First, and I'm absolutely not being facetious here, keep making, keep engaging, keep thinking about this amazing act of making and sharing that we do. But in the months and perhaps years to come, we are going to be looking to our community and our communities to really lead the way in the recovery, the resurgence of arts and culture on this land, specifically how that relates to Indigenous peoples and communities. I really foresee a time when we're going to have to get into our communities again. There's going to be a new normal, and we need you to be part of how we look at that. One of the great things when we developed CKS is we did a 1.5-year consultation We got some external people, Indigenous researchers to do some work for us and consultants. We had a vast consultation. I think we can probably look to those kinds of things again. I think as this sector recovers, what we want to see is how now do we need to change? I think that will happen. This is unprecedented, and so we're going to count on everybody to help guide us that way. And be good to each other.
There's a talk about international travel. So if you want to speak to that, because some people are planning to do that in their next season.
Absolutely. Currently, and as it says in our COVID-19 information, we are not supporting travel at all until at least the end of July, and that will be updated, obviously, depending on information we get from public health officials. What we in CKS are saying is if you do have travel that's outside of that, we are still accepting applications for it. So if it's past July 31st, we still accepting it. We're encouraging people not to, because it's so, we just know so little. If you already had plans that were for next year, and you still want to put the application in, it will be assessed. We may put conditions on it. Heard a report today that Air Canada was expecting that international travel would start up again by the end of the year or the beginning of next year. So can you say, oh, can I put one in for next July? With the hope that it's back on? Absolutely. Again, we will accept it and assess it. And again, there might be conditions on it, but we are not saying you can't put those in. What we're saying is if it's for now up to the end of July, that is ineligible. So if you put one in that, or had put one in before that had traveled during this period, the officers will contact you, say this is ineligible. You can withdraw it. So it doesn't go against your total number of grants that you can apply for. There's no penalty for withdrawing. If you withdraw and then you think, oh, I want to put in dates that are farther, you can do that. And again, same rules apply that I just mentioned.
Okay. There's a question about language preservation. Can you, this is from the Michif in the Red River area.
Okay, absolutely. One of the things that we determined to put into this program was language preservation, done through arts and culture in a range of ways, and we do support those kinds of projects and have been. We get quite a few of them and some very innovative ones. So, for example, one community, they have a cultural carrier who's a storyteller from that community who also teaches language through that. So we support a lot of projects like that. What we don't support is straight ahead school curriculum, for example. So there are a few things in there, but if it's a community initiative of knowledge transfer, not just language, yeah, always best to check with us first, but in general, yes, that's eligible.
Okay. We have any number of questions on the chat, but before we go there, I just want to go back to the CKS program and maybe some success stories that we've had, Steven, and projects that have been successful, and also that maybe some projects that were unexpected and that have really taken off and taken CKS in a direction that maybe we didn't anticipate.
Yeah, we've been really amazed at the wide variety of projects that have come through. It really speaks to the incredible diversity of practice in our communities. Certainly, I've been thrilled by the arts projects we've supported, and which many of you will see in galleries, on stages. And those are wonderful. What I've been really thrilled with, though, is the amount of community-based projects, things like the language initiatives, on the land pedagogy through art and culture, things that would just never have been eligible before. I think that's, I knew that the full circles of this land were going to, continue to do very well and get more money. I wasn't surprised at that. But what has surprised me is some of these amazing community-based initiatives. And we're seeing such wonderful things. A lot of youth-based projects, again, things that you wouldn't see because they're not on gallery walls. They're not on stages. They're not in print or, on our screens. You may never even hear about them, but I know that they've had an effect. And in our reports from these communities, they say, this has had an effect on the young people in our communities. They're learning their languages, they're learning their culture, and they're expressing themselves in ways that they hadn't before. And it doesn't have to be traditional or customary. It can be in a very contemporary way as well. Some communities are reviving traditions, artistic and cultural traditions that had almost been lost. Those are really thrilling to me. We're getting a lot of real innovation in terms of, because, for example, we support researchers in culture, and there's just such a dearth of good Indigenous scholarship through an Indigenous lens, because it was so hard to get funding for those kinds of things. We have amazing researchers, scholars, curators, other arts professionals. So I've been really pleased with some of those projects. A lot of international, because our people want to collaborate with as part of the global Indigenous as well. So we've seen a real uptick in collaboration, and in the North, we've seen a real increase. And one of our newest members of our core, Kogivut, doing an incredible job getting to communities in the North, sharing Inuit performing arts in amazing ways. So I've just been really thrilled to hear back from people. It's obviously, of course, as we're taught, it's not perfect. Nothing we make is. And we're constantly looking at it to see ways that we can make it better. But I have been very thrilled with the response we've got. Like I said, we've been able to really put a lot more money into our community, and people are doing great things with it.
Great. Thank you, Steve. I am looking at a number of questions now that have come through the group chat, and I'm thinking that maybe I'm going to go down those questions. Some have already been answered, but what do you think, Sergio?
Margot, I've compiled the questions actually on my end. If you like, I can jump in and ask them to Steven directly. Would that work for everyone?
That would be fantastic, Sergio. Thank you.
No, my pleasure. So Steven, first question came up in regards to requests for extensions. Do you need to write a request for extension on grants due to COVID-19? This specific project was based around traveling to the Yukon and Alaska to research some stories.
Yes, please, just because we need to track it, but it's a really simple process. You just find the update form, the officer can help you with that. You send it in, it gets approved, no problem. But yeah, we do ask that you notify us, so that the big thing around that is that, so there's an automatic system that if your final report doesn't come in, that means you have an overdue final report. And if you have an overdue final report, you can't get you can get a new grant, but you can't receive the money from it. So it could really affect you. So when an extension is granted, the final report is also moved forward. So, so yes, please do.
Thank you, Steven. The next question was for collaborative projects between artists working from home and engaging through digital environments. Should they apply for Digital Strategies Fund or for the channels that they normally apply? This is specific to arts creation.
It depends. I would suggest it depends on how expensive the project is. If it's something that would fit within that $55,000 or the $50,000, that's a great way to go. What I will say about those two initiatives as well, they also do not count against your number of applications you could put in every year. You can't apply to that and with the same project to our regular stream. However, if you started it with that money and then you wanted to continue or expand it into say a $100,000 project, you could do that. So let's say you went for the $5,000 to get this thing going. People love it. Then you thought, oh, there's a deadline coming up in CKS. We've used up our 5,000 and we'd like to expand this. You can also do that. Again, contact us first just to make sure that there's no overlaps and things like that. We can help you out with it. I would suggest that one's going to be quicker, a turnaround through the digital fund, 3 to 4 weeks, as opposed to our, 3 to 4 months through our project. So, but if it is a big project that needs 100,000, you probably have to come to our regular program.
Excellent. Thank you, Steven. Before I move on to the next question, I actually just had something come in the chat that I think would be great, and that was a link to the extension form or the update change form. Is that something that you could possibly, if you have it handy, Steven, if you could just drop it into the group chat?
I don't have it handy, but I will send it to you.
Perfect.
And then you can distribute it.
I'll send it through I'll send it through an IPAA newsletter along with the recording of this conversation. So I just got a question that came in from Rosa. Thank you. I'll capture that, but let me just move on to the next one. And it is specific to also to deadlines. And I feel like we might have covered this already, but I'm just going to go right into it. Long-term grants are high competition. It's best to have all of your I's dotted and T's crossed for your submission. The deadline for this is coming up, and it's hard for my particular project to be meeting with all of the partners involved who are all on different reserves. All of the communities are dealing with really tough situations at home, as we all know. Is there any way this long-term project grant deadline could be extended to a later date? So that's specific to the long-term project grant and an extension on the deadline.
We wanted to keep the deadlines as close to what we already have as possible, so there was less disruption, and so that, because people don't always check our website all the time. I will consider that, though, that given all the planning that goes into that, I will consider that.
Okay, there you go. Active changes, like everything else. And sorry, another part of that same question, if they do have to put in an extension on a grant that is outright, will that affect their eligibility to apply for another grant if the final report is not in? So question about final reports and how that affects your status to be able to submit other applications.
Yeah, and there's another one that comes up with that. As we've said, always make sure you get the approval so that final report date moves forward. But I will say too that we have a rule that says you can't have a short-term project grant and a long-term project grant that overlap in time. Now that might affect some people who need an extension to their short-term project, but had intended to put a long-term project for something totally different that they can start right away. So if that is the case for you, contact us. If it's doable and we think it's viable, we might make exceptions to that rule on a case-by-case basis. It won't affect that many people, but it might affect some.
Excellent. Thank you, Steven. Okay, so this is specific to theater, and I think related to the question that was brought up earlier by Margot about specifically funding to theater and Canadian Actors Equity Association, ACTRA, those types of fees. They're generally not included in budgets, and as things are moved into the sort of online live stream sphere, more so a comment and less of a question, but do you have sort of any thoughts around those types of like union-specific fees for theater companies that might be considering navigating to a digital sphere?
I know that there are discussions going on, not led by us, obviously. It's through those organizations that represent artists. I know that, for example, in visual arts, the Carfac and Rav, who are the industry who set certain levels of fees, they have come out with a special fee structure, their guidelines. We encourage those organizations to also consider that. We can't make them, they're not mandated by us. What we say in our guidelines is that fees must be paid to artists. And we just ask them how they set their fees in CKS, because we don't mandate that you use any certain one, but we do tell our peer assessors that the rates that are paid need to be reasonable, and that is a criteria of the grant, of the assessment process. So if you do have sort of a guideline to go to, that's always better. We get a lot of times, and I'll just send this out to the community, so many of our artists and organizations have and continue to work with elders and knowledge keepers. And in the past, at the Canada Council, fees to elders and knowledge keepers were not eligible, but they are in CKS. And so we still get a number of applications that come in where the honorarium to elders and knowledge keepers is low, and I think in years past they were encouraged to make them low so they wouldn't look like fees and they could put them as honorariums. They're eligible as fees in CKS, and they should be treated as such. You know, the knowledge that they have and what they bring to our projects and to our communities has value, intrinsic value, but it also has value in terms of remuneration, and we would suggest and we encourage people to pay accordingly, and don't think that it's not eligible, because I think that's what we generally get when we ask about that. They say, oh, that they always told us to put like $100 honorarium. That is no longer the case in CKS.
Excellent. Thank you, Steven. I've got one more question here, but I just want to note to everyone that if you check the chat, Native Earth has been kind enough to, they found the link, I believe, canadacouncil.ca/funding/grants/reports. If you check the chat, I believe that link should take you there. And as Cynthia, our executive director, has pointed out, we're also going to try and link the PDF form in our next newsletter. So I hope everyone here is signed up to our newsletter as well. The last question that I've received through chat, we have a grant that involves several performers and travel in June. We have talked to the performers involved and they are willing to work online. Do I have to communicate these changes to the Canada Council for the Arts?
Yes, please. We would like to, using that form that Sergio just pointed out, that Native Earth, so Isaac or Keith, whoever sent that, thank you. Yeah, we do request that, but again, not so that we can manage you. We won't tell you what to do, just so that we can keep track of all these changes. And we do have we are accountable to the government, not in the sense that they get to tell us who to give money to. They do not. I want to make that very clear. But we do report to them what we fund, and it is also auditable by the government. So if they said, hey, you gave them a grant to do this, but they did, their final report says something completely different, we need to have that documentation that, no, they sent this to us and we approved it.
That's excellent, Stephen. And those are all the questions that I've found in the chat. If anybody else would like to share any questions at this moment, please feel free to enter them in the chat. And I'm going to just...
I do have one question.
Go ahead.
Well, I guess it's partly been my desire since way back in the late 80s when when I was sitting on all the when I was sitting on the the Aboriginal Advisory and also the Racialized Artist Advisory, when we began to advise about having indigenizing the council a bit more. And in those early days, we had, for a while there, the Aboriginal Secretariat had an advisory. And so I guess it's come to my attention from a number of people, as well as just my own desire, to have an advisory of elders, or cultural leaders, artists, curators, making sure that we have, an advisory to our CKS program. Something, because we're accountable to our many communities, as you know. So I think there is this kind of sometimes a concern that bringing our culture along with us, it's really important to speak to our advisory, our elders, our people that know more than we do, so that together collectively there's some kind of accountability around some of the decisions we're making or the evolution of programs. And so I just wondered, I know there's challenges to this, but I wonder if you have a response to that, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Margot. And I was on that for a while myself as well. Up till now, what we've done is we've had ad hoc consultation as per sort of something that's come up. So we have done some of that and have had advisors and advisory committees and groups. They've been specific to issues. In terms of having a larger consultative advisory body, this has come up a few times. For me, I like the idea of having that, having people have that role. It's logistically challenging, and I don't mean that in the sense that we can't do it. Just in the sense that I'm on one of those right now, for example, for OCAD University. And, we get together 3 times a year, and we do as much as we can in the day that we have. But I wonder if, and I will give this some more consideration, because I'm happy to move in that direction if in general the community thinks we should have a standing body. We certainly can do it. There's no restriction to doing it. Like I said, I've done these sort of smaller ones that were very issue oriented. So when we're looking at certain things or looking at certain elements of the program, we've had smaller advisory groups. And we certainly, on our research that we're doing, each one of those has an advisory group that we form, made up of practitioners, cultural carriers, knowledge keepers. So, I mean, if there's a very, I will ask more people. Like I said, I'm not against having a standing committee, but in terms of, I find these sort of smaller ad hoc ones more effective because people are coming in for very specific issues. But I'm open. I'm very open to that. And if I've heard both sides, and but it's an open discussion. Absolutely.
It might be something that that someone takes on, the study of that and how the various ways that can work. I mean, it would be very valuable. I think we all have a challenge. I'm sure, everyone in their jurisdiction and their town, their cities have these challenges where, it's hard sometimes to, when you're asked to have, like recently we were asked, one of our partners was asked to have 3 letters from the 3 host First Nations in Vancouver area. Well, those people are really, really busy. I mean, even as Indigenous artists, just accessing any number of people in those communities is challenging enough. And then all the work, they already have a huge workload, and for us to constantly be going to them is not workable. really. But really, you know, it takes time to find those advisors and people that you can turn to. So I guess I know it is a challenge, but it is something that is really important if we're trying to make decisions, I suppose, for the future of things, to be able to pull an advisory together. So thanks for your thoughtful response on that. I do think we need to think it through a little bit more too. No?
Mhm. And I think, you know, this, as we move into the recovery phase, maybe that's a time when we're, you know, to do something like that, because we're going to have to make some changes. And definitely with times of change, I think it's really vital to have that kind of grounding back to our communities. So maybe that will give us an opportunity as we look to the future of Indigenous arts and culture on this land as we go through this phase. Maybe that would be time to sort of, you know, because then a lot of energy could be directed towards that. And I would be open to doing that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Sergio.
I've got no more questions from the chat, so I think some final thoughts perhaps from Margot, Steven, Cynthia, if you'd like to jump in. Otherwise, we can ask Sharon Brass to close today's town hall.
So going once, going twice. Does anyone else have a burning question you want to add to the chat there?
I just saw something come up. Okay, so we had a tour canceled, the travel was paid, but the airline will not allow the tickets reimbursed for future travel. But the question is, the communities want us to still go there when this pandemic ceases. Yeah, I don't, sorry, this question isn't a full question, but it has something to do with reimbursement.
Sorry, that's for me.
Oh, hi, Rosa.
Hi,
Would you like to ask a
that's for me,
question?
Rosa?
Yep, go ahead.
Yes, I was trying to rush because I heard that it was gonna end. So sorry about that. My question is, we are getting reimbursed, but only for future travel. We're not getting the money like back from the airlines. So what's happened is I've talked to the communities in Nova Scotia and they want us to still go there when this pandemic is over, because what's happened is they've gotten funding to support our tour. And so that funding is specifically for that tour. And I'm wondering, do I need to write up a new paper for that, or is that okay because it's still going to be a tour, or because things have changed, do I have to do a change of project paper or whatever?
Thanks, Rosa. I would just get in touch with your program officer and just say, you know, we're postponing this. You know, you've already spent any money you've already spent. Whether you're going to get it refunded or it's going to be a credit or not does not matter. We will not ask for that back. We have had situations where people have spent money that they can't recoup, and then still want to do the project, but now won't have enough money to do it at a later date. That's a real challenge. But again, we will, on a case-by-case basis, look at those kinds of things. I would just do the check-in with your program officer. Again, the more we know about the situation you're in, the better, and the better we are able to support you. And like I said, it's really easy. Even if that changes later on, at least we've got that documentation. So, you know, the program officers and certainly in CKS all of our program officers are working from home and have accessibility. You know, get in touch with us. You know, it might take them a little longer to get back to you. If you have issues and can't get a hold of somebody, feel free to contact me directly. I'm happy to answer questions or send those questions on to whoever would be able to answer them for you. But we're here to work with you. So, you know, our officers are absolutely capable of supporting you in these ways.
Thank you very much.
I noticed that our executive director, Cynthia Licker-Sage, is on camera now, so we'll open the floor. Oh, unfortunately, I think you're on mute, or are you still, do you want to get your phone? There you go. Still on mute. Sorry, Cynthia. Is your phone here?
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Stephen, for joining us today. This really means a lot to us, and thank you for taking the time, generosity of heart for answering our questions. Margot, thank you again for moderating, and Sharon, really appreciate your kind words. Yamagoa.
Yamagoa.
Wonderful. Margot, would you like to throw it to our elder unless somebody else has any other comments, questions, concerns?
Going once, going twice.
I think it's safe to move
Yes,
to close.
I think it is.
Thank you, Margot.
Really appreciate all your time today, everyone.
Oh,
and,
one moment. Sorry, Margot, to interrupt. Sharon Shorty,
Yes.
you'd like to ask a question?
Hello from the Yukon. No, I just had a comment. It's nice to see my fellow artists and theater practititioners, and it was, it's really positive to do. I'm new to Zoom, and I didn't know you could put your picture up. I was like, wow, Sergio could sure stay still for a long time.
I'm used to posing.
Yeah, I'm just like, holy smokes, I'm just like fidgety. But anyways, it's good to see you, Steve, and thank you for IPAA for doing this. I'm glad I got to see the email. I don't really see any point of email anymore. I got no gigs. Anyways,
Good to see you, Sharon.
I look forward to seeing you all in the future sometime.
Absolutely.
Take
Thanks,
care all.
Sharon. Thanks. I too, Sharon. I've just been, I don't know how many Zoom meetings I've had in the last few weeks. It's been really great, and learning how all my different devices, like trying to navigate this, is really been a journey. But I really have really enjoyed actually seeing people and talking to them, and hearing, getting uplifted by things like today, seeing everybody who's participating, it keeps us connected. So I appreciate the time. Thank you very much, Stephen. Good to see you again. Thank you, Cynthia and Sergio. Thank you for helping set all of this up. I'd like to now turn it over to our Sharon, our elder, to close today for us, if you would, my dear. I really appreciate your giving us your words and your time.
Hello, everybody. I am just reflecting on many of the words that were shared, and as we look forward to the West, to what my people would say in the West is our future, and there is such uncertain times, but we have a little ceremony that when we're about to leave each other, we'll stand and face the West together and take that first step into the future. And so although many of you may have situations that have changed, you're not alone. And that another thing my people say is that, and maybe your people too, is that the ancestors didn't know our names, but they knew we were coming. And each one of you, I think of culture as like a beautiful chord, and it takes all these notes to make this beautiful chord of harmony. And I want to honor each and every one of you for being dreamers and visionaries, and for manifesting a legacy so that we can all live and be together and share our stories, rituals, dances, and songs. So I'm deeply touched to be a part of this group, and for each of you to know that I'm thinking of you as our light carriers, and that all of our legends are based on in the darkness comes the light. That something magical can shapeshift and transform, so that out of our struggles come our medicine. And so I stand with you during this great time, and especially those of you who may have loved ones that are affected. And I just offer this blessing that for each and every one of you to remember your home and remember your ancestors and remember your medicines and remember your visions and dreams now, and to be fearless in your pursuit of bringing beauty into the world. All my relations, ho.
Now, Goa.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Until we meet again.
Until we meet again.
Mhm.